I wanted to make some hand-built mugs with black and white vertical and horizontal stripes, but I didn't want those stripes to feel painted on or like they were on top of the clay. And so my mind turned to the sort of marbling that goes by many names in the ceramic world. You might hear nerikomi, you might hear agateware, you might hear marbled clay. They're all essentially the same thing with subtle differences. So here I am making this clay, and it's simple enough to make, but there's a few little tricks that can help you get the effect you're after. This is a porcelain as well as a mid-range stoneware that fires black. And when I was growing up, people would tell you that you could not marble these two clays together because of their different shrinkage rates and the difference in grog and fineness of the clays. But we've got some tricks here that can help ensure there are very few issues with this sort of marbling. You do want to make sure the clays are fairly similar in their moisture content when you put them together, and obviously you need to ensure that they are the same cone clay. You're always increasing the probability of cracks when you marble clay, but with these methods you will decrease the frequency of those cracks. Earlier I was scoring the porcelain to count how many stripes I could cut out of it. I wanted pretty even stripes on both types of clay with a little bit of play, so I used this loose wire. You can use taut wires or the Mud Tools Mud Shark to get a cleaner cut if that's what you're after. And in this bowl and on that brush I have magic water. Magic water has sodium silicate and soda ash added to it in very small amounts. The soda ash is a flux, meaning it helps things melt, and the sodium silicate is sodium, which is salt, which is a flux, as well as silica, which is essentially glass. So in a way, we're putting a tiny bit of glaze between these layers, a very, very small concentration. And the difference in acidity in this water as compared to regular water will also help these layers adhere. But it's really that flux, the sodium and the ash, as well as the silica, the glass, that is helping us reduce the cracks in this agateware. As you might imagine, one of the big risks with patterning clay in this way is air bubbles. So really ensure that you lay the clay down almost as if you're rolling it down rather than slapping it. And if you do slap it straight down, just slap it very hard. But here I am laying down from one end to the other, pushing it down with my palm, and then wiggling it onto the other clay until it stops sliding. It's sort of like a water and a wiggle technique. And it's a little messy, but we're going to trim up the ends of this later, and it won't be an issue. So don't worry too much about the mess while you're going. If I'm going to the trouble of making this clay, because it is a multi-day process, I like to make a lot, and this allows me to play with ideas further than just those I have in mind. You always finish up a batch of mugs or something, and then you think, if only I had more of that clay, I would try a vase or a sculpture. So I'd encourage you to maybe test to ensure you like the finished look of your clay, but then go ahead and make a large batch so that you're not disappointed later. Just remember that 2 blocks of clay is 50 pounds, so you are going to be dealing with a pretty large amount. Maybe do half of each, put that in a bag, and then do the other half. You don't need to use magic water to make this work, and in many cases, you don't need water at all. The magic water is sort of insurance for how different these clays are, especially given that I won't be wedging the clay together, so it's not getting any extra smushing from here. But if your clays are very similar in hydration and shrinkage rate, you can probably get away with just wedging them together with no water. You'll see later that I will let this clay rest, and even in this good match scenario, it might be a good idea to let those clays rest for a bit of time before working with them as well. Once all my layers are complete, I'll drop it on a solid portion of a table a few times just to help smush everything together. You could do this in a bag on a cement floor as well. If you're in a group studio, just be mindful of the noise and jostling of the table this can cause. Alrighty, we are all done layering, and take a look at that cross section. But remember, I want to make a mug, and that's going to require a very long slab in order to make my cylinder. And I want to preserve these lines rather than rolling in multiple directions. So I'm actually cutting my clay in half and then restacking it so that when I roll my slab, I can just roll in one direction, and that will preserve the lines. It does increase the likelihood of warping. I'm using just the dropping method to kind of help it tie those pieces together. Sorry for the wiggle. Now it's time to wrap it all up, and I cannot stress this enough. Do not try to work with this clay the same day. Even if your two starting clays are very similar in hydration, it's just going to be so much easier if you give the clay at least a day, probably two, to even out its hydration. So I like to wrap it in a bag and then stick it in a box and let that sit at least 24 hours. It'll be a much easier clay to work with after. If you want spirals, you can go ahead and wedge it more from here. You can also continue to slice and rearrange so you get different patterns in the nerikomi fashion. And remember, it doesn't need to stop at 2 clays. You can do as many as you like. Enjoy.